The word of the Lord concerning Zimbabwe. I want us to go through a 10-year journey, almost 10 years, looking at what God has been doing in the nation of Zimbabwe. God had been speaking to me about Zimbabwe, but I started to record my prophecies in January of 2015, when the Lord started to show me the things that were about to come to pass and which I'm about to share with you right now. And the reason for that is that if you are the kind of person who has got a burden for Zimbabwe, or you love Zimbabwe, or you are somehow one way or another interested in what is happening in Zimbabwe, the reason why I'm doing is that so that you can have a source of information about what God is actually doing. There's a lot of guesswork and so forth. There's a lot of speculation. We know what people speculate about on media and all of those things, which is all right. But if God is speaking, you need to hear what He's also saying. Definitely, I would want to hear what God is saying so that it gives me a little bit of direction, right? So the reason why I'm taking us back to 2015 January is because I want us to see the picture that God has been painting over time, from that time until where we are, and maybe a little bit into the future. Okay, let us see what God has been doing. What will become clear right now as we speak about these prophecies and go into them is that God has been working through Zimbabwe. Now, it is very difficult sometimes to understand why Zimbabwe is going through so much struggle and suffering, and things are not moving, and yet God is very much aware. Why is He not doing something? I cannot possibly answer that. He knows why He's doing it, but what I do know is that He has revealed these things before they've happened, which means that He's somehow allowing these things and is actively involved. The bigger picture, only He knows what He's trying to accomplish. Okay, so on the 16th of January, the Lord spoke to me about what was happening in the politics of Zimbabwe, and I actually wrote it here with the date 16th of January 2015. This is what I wrote. Okay, so I saw a power struggle between Grace Mugabe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, and the then president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. Now, the result was that before Grace could implement a strategy to reveal whatever she wanted to use to get what she wanted to get out of this meeting, she vanished from the scene, leaving Mnangagwa to rule with an iron fist. Okay, so what happened is that I saw them sitting in a boardroom. It looked like a boardroom, right? And on the one side was Grace, and opposite her was Mnangagwa, and Mugabe was on the other side, right? Sort of chairing the meeting. But what I saw was that it was a very contentious meeting, and the most vocal person in that meeting was the first lady, who was obviously Grace Mugabe. But she was really threatening Mnangagwa, and almost like putting pressure on Mugabe to do something about what she knew. She was threatening to reveal a lot of secrets and a lot of information unless she got what she wanted. It was a very heated meeting. And I saw that Mnangagwa, who was then a minister or a deputy president, was just sitting there. He was not saying a lot. It was mainly Grace who was saying that. So as she was speaking like that, the scene just cut suddenly, all right? And then it moved out of the way, and a new scene appeared. But in this new scene, I saw now President Mnangagwa sitting on what looked like a throne. And you could clearly see that he had been ordained or anointed, or he had already been, put there. He was now ruling. But what was so interesting about that was he was ruling with an iron fist, which I came to understand later on was that it meant actually the army. And from that time onwards, both Grace Mugabe and President Robert Mugabe were nowhere to be seen. They appeared to have been vanished or swept away by history completely. They completely vanished. And the only person who was left was President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now, this was January 2015. When I saw this, as you would know, those of us who follow, or those of you who follow the Zimbabwean situation and so forth, you would remember that President Mnangagwa was actually fired. He was actually dismissed by President Mugabe, and we later learned that he had to walk to Mozambique, and he had then to seek refuge in South Africa. And I remember thinking to myself, what does this mean? Because this man is supposed to be president according to what the Lord showed me. This is not making sense. The man's political career is over. I did not know about the army's involvement or General Chiwenga or whatever was happening. I didn't know any of that. But what I knew was that God had said that this man would rule Zimbabwe, and that grace and President Robert Mugabe would be swept away. There would be no room for them. All right. But it began to make sense when a few days later we then learned about the coup, which is now the iron that we're talking about. When the coup came, and then we started to see, uniformed forces, taking strategic positions, appearing on TV. They didn't say who was going to be president and so forth, but eventually the long and short of it is that President Mnangagwa came back to Zimbabwe, and then he was appointed, obviously, through the internal processes to then succeed President Mugabe. And then he was voted into power by the majority of Zimbabweans and so forth. So it was very interesting how the word of the Lord still came to be fulfilled, even though it looked like the word was false or it was dead in the water. So God reveals the deep things. There is no way I could have known this. And I even thought that what I had seen was wrong, or it was false, or it was a mistake. However, the Lord confirmed. And as we know that a few months after that, President Mugabe passed on, and Grace Mugabe is no longer in the Zimbabwe political scene. She's literally vanished from it, just like it was shown to me by the Lord. So what am I saying? I'm saying that even the coming of President Mnangagwa into power, this is something that God was aware of, and God allowed it for his purposes. So sometimes you might find that you may be in a different political camp and so forth, but at the end of the day, God is not into camps and so forth. God is God. The only thing that God is faithful to are his purposes, but we may not understand why. So what I'm trying to say is that President Mnangagwa is where he is because God allowed him to be there for his purposes. Why? Because 2 years before he became president, God had already spoken to him about it. So between 14 November 2017 and 21 November 2017, these events leading to President Mnangagwa becoming president occurred in Zimbabwe. This was almost three years, just under 3 years from the date that this prophecy came. So you can clearly see that God was involved in this. So this is the first part of the prophecies, that what I call now the Chronicles of Zimbabwe prophecies, that the Lord started to speak to me, to reveal to me what was coming. So this must give us encouragement to know that God is in the midst of everything. It may not make sense to us right now, but I can tell you God reveals the deep things ahead of time. God bless you.